So I'm Carrie Daly from Volta, and I head up sales for the East Coast. And this is a great panel. If you guys have been listening this morning, and especially after the lunch kickoff, storytelling has been threaded into almost every presentation, and really emphasized in the one right after lunch about the Hispanic audiences and just the fragmentation in the marketplace, the need for authenticity, and how challenging that can be with storytelling. So we're going to have the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll level set with a question. Just kick us off. So Judith, feel free.
Hi, everybody. My name's Judith Carr-Rodriguez. I'm the CEO, one of the partners at independent creative agency FIG. At FIG, we specialize in storytelling, so I guess this is a good subject for us to be all part of. We specialize in storytelling for the information age, which is the world we live in today. Highly fragmented media landscape, super empowered, engaged consumers. So we need to tell stories that will really stand out in our environment. We really believe in storytelling as the most powerful vehicle for marketers. Stories can overthrow a government. I want a show of hands. Who has a child? Stories can put a child to sleep after a long day. They are immensely powerful, and so as marketers, we need to harness them continuously, but tell them differently for the world that we live in today. And so we're privileged to work with Publix, with Tropicana, with brands like Benjamin Moore to help them figure out what kind of stories should they tell for the world that we're living in today.
I'm Mark Nielsen, Director of Creative at Publix. So if you're not familiar with Publix, we're a grocery store in the South United States, 95-year-old brand. I've been there for 26 years, all on the creative side, so started my career there, and have just worked my way through because I do love this brand and do believe in the power of storytelling and how we have a certain brand of doing that, which we'll talk about more throughout this conversation.
I'm just grateful that Judith asked the question for me as a children's nutrition brand. How many of you have kids? I'm Katie Marston. I'm the CMO of Once Upon a Farm, which is a leading children's nutrition brand founded by John Foraker, Cassandra Curtis, and Jennifer Garner. You might know us from our organic cold pressure-protected pouches, or hopefully lots of you have our pantry and lunchbox staples in your cupboards. And as much as storytelling can put a child to sleep, we equally believe that it can nourish the next generation. So looking forward to being here.
And hi, everyone. My name's Pat Degnan, and I'm the Vice President of our Marketing Center of Excellence at Tropicana Brands Group. For those of you that don't know, our portfolio includes Tropicana, Naked Smoothies, Izzy, and Kavita. So really looking forward to spending some time together today.
All right, thanks everybody. This is a super impressive panel. We have agencies represented, we have brands represented, and in every sector, so it's great. One of the things we talked about during our prep call is that storytelling is often talked about as a brand's greatest power. And all communications are stories. Everything is storytelling. Even a product on a shelf is technically telling a story. And there's a massive power in the ability to do that. So just to level set, we're going to go to each panelist and ask about what storytelling means for them. So we'll start at the opposite end. Pat, if you want to kick that off.
Yeah, that's great. I think at its core, storytelling to me is just the opportunity to connect with humans. And as Judith mentioned, whether that's reading a story to my 3-year-old at night or sharing a pint with a good buddy, it brings people together, right? And as to have the privilege of stewarding storytelling for brands, we need to take that seriously, and it's such an opportunity for our brands to connect with our consumers and humans. And it's such an interesting time to be able to be a part of this industry, but it's one we love to do.
Love that. Storytelling is, to me, what separates selling a product and selling and connecting with the lifestyle of your audience. And so it's so many things that it is, but it's also when we look at what you're not doing. And so if you are becoming a forgettable brand, it's because you're not telling a point of difference that truly separates yourself from the competition, or you're not being an advocate for your consumers or a cause, taking a real stance in your messaging, and you're most likely not leaning in and testing some of the tactics and the messaging that push the envelope in the fast-paced world. So we often talk about what storytelling is and means to us, and then check ourselves to make sure that we're not falling into a place of complacency.
Yeah, similarly for us, storytelling is our way to connect with our audience. I mean, especially in the grocery business, it is pure commodity, right? And so the way we're able to stand apart is by the stories that we tell and how we tell them. And so for a long time, we have believed in the power of connecting emotionally with our customers and really trying to build that irrational relationship, which has proven to work over 95 years, really 35 years of telling these types of stories. And so when we do that, what we're able to do is not only kind of say what's important to us as a brand, but find those places where we know what's important to our customers, but we're telling it in an authentic way, because that's the only thing that will ever resonate with our customers, is when they believe who we are. And the only way we can do that is through this type of storytelling.
I would just add, I think as marketers, we need to embrace that storytelling is everything. You said, right? It's the decisions we make on a daily basis, from packaging to the company that we keep, in terms of like how we think about using brand ambassadors. And Katie made that point, very powerfully. It's sometimes also the things you don't do. So I think that's the fundamental part of this. The other thing is that there's some really good proven facts that we should all make sure we arm ourselves with when we go and talk to our boards and we talk with the people that help us make investment decisions. So I'll just give you a couple of numbers here, and then I promise I'll put my book away. So companies that make the decision to put storytelling at the heart of their growth strategy literally outperform the competition. They're 2 times more likely to see revenue growth of 5% or more. And high growth companies invest 3 times more in their marketing. So if we're not doing this, we are not really leaning into the potential of our company. So fundamentally, storytelling is crucial.
Thank you. That was awesome. And one of the things we talked about is it is something that a lot of brands do. They'll tell their story, but it's very obvious, and some of those stats help, and I know you have more, on playing it safe, with your storytelling, the same old story, because it's tried and true and it works, and just how potentially detrimental that can be. So when do you know to push the envelope? When do you know to keep it more conservative and true to brand? So every person on the panel is going to have a different perspective, whether they're at an agency, they're at a brand, and their role at that company. So Judith, I'm going to start with you. As an agency working across different industries, how do you balance your clients' appetite for bold creative with their with their natural risk aversion? Can you share an example of when pushing past the safe really made a difference, and what you did to convince them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't love the idea of risk. There is no such thing as a risky story. There are boring stories, and there are stories that follow the status quo of your category. So it's one of the reasons why at FIG we invented a data platform called Story Data that helps our clients visualize their story versus a competitive set, and then helps us make really choiceful decisions about whether we're going to be more meaningful, or whether we're going to be more emotive, or whether we're going to be more branded, or whether we're going to be more different. And that really, really helps us as humans just make the right decisions about how we're going to stand out. Because in this messy media environment that we live in, if we're not standing out, then we're wasting our investment. And so that's been a really helpful tool for FIG and for our clients, is just to visualize what the status quo looks like and then make choiceful decisions about how we don't do that.
Yeah. The next question is for you, Mark, with Publix. You really have built a reputation for heartfelt storytelling, as you referenced, 35 years in the making for doing that, around family, community. How do you keep those fresh while wanting to still make a statement and not have it fall into like, oh, well, this usually works with our audience, and keeping it kind of safe? What do you rely on to push it?
We try really hard. That's what I'll say. And we have the conversations all the time. So I was just having almost this very conversation on Friday with my boss, the VP of marketing, because we have this success that we've built and this customer base, but if we stay the same, then we're going to start losing our new customers, and really even our existing customers are going to start to ignore us because they know what to expect. And so it doesn't mean that we have to do a 180 or reinvent ourselves, right? Like if we changed too much, we would lose the customers that we have, and nobody wants to do that. We've seen the effects of that with other brands. And so really our approach to that, we are always asking ourselves, how can we be better? You know, is this an authentic story? Is this a story that resonates with today's audience? And it doesn't mean that it has to be like super trendy or follow some fad, but are we looking into insights? Yes, we are always looking at insights, always knowing who our audience is, and then just pushing the creative. We look at a lot of work, and we continue to push ourselves. And I think anybody who works in a brand will know there's always somebody at the brand who wants to protect everything just the way it is. And so I do believe it's our, responsibility to know where the line is, but always be kind of pushing on it. What's next? How do we go a little bit further? And it just takes a lot of work and kind of gut intuition.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to skip down to Patrick for a quick sec. What makes a story truly resonate in today's saturated media landscape? And and I'd love everybody's input on this. One of the things we talked about in our prep call too was, how do you tell that story in 6 seconds or 15 seconds, and have that thread carry through? It's easier with long form content, certainly, and the content that you own and push out, and you certainly own your advertising. But when you're trying to keep that and have it resonate with everything else you're doing, what does that look like?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. I like to boil it down to that old saying of like, people remember how you make them feel, not necessarily what you say. And I think that's like super relevant and applicable right now because, I don't know the stat of how many ads we're all getting hit across how many channels in a single day. But like, if you can make someone stop to smile or laugh and like remember that and create that association with your brand, I think that's how you stick out now, right? And they don't have to memorize whatever your tagline or copy is, and it doesn't have to be perfect. But if you can create that like emotional connection and people start to then associate your brand with those positive feelings, I think that's ultimately what we want our stories to do.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that? Because I think that's such an insightful thing. I actually do know the numbers because it's my job to, but people make 35,000 decisions in a day. They get hit by 15,000 marketing messages. And of all those decisions, 99% of them are made by our subconscious brain. So we don't think about those decisions at all. So unless you're telling a story that is sticky and just gets into my brain in some kind of earworm, it is just going to be forgotten. So yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Great, I appreciate it, thanks. Okay, Katie, Once Upon a Farm. Consumer tastes and cultural expectations shift quickly. And I would imagine with kids that even happens more quickly than not. How do you test or gauge when a story is truly connecting versus when it's safe but forgettable?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like with kids, it's always evolving. Anyone in here who is on or had a feeding journey with young kids knows that what you wanted, one, it's very personal, but it's probably different than your mother or your mother-in-law's input that they are trying to impart on you on what they want. So we talk about that. I see nodding heads all the time. And so the difference between connected today and also evolving between playing it safe for us is about listening. And so it's about listening to the data points, and Carrie, jump in on any data point you want with me. But it's also very much to the people. So we invest far more at Once Upon a Farm than I have at other companies that were far larger that I've worked at. Even when we were very, very small, even when we were, less than 20 million. And it's so that we can not only trend forecast today and know what is relevant to families today, but also what they're going to look at and look for next. It's about testing our brand health and sentiment, and then even storyline impact so that we can craft a story that resonates with our consumers, our families, and evolves with them without alienating.
It's a really good point. And one of the things I heard this morning, too, that just started to make my mind spin was predictive listening, right? And so it's hard enough to figure out what you're doing now, what products you want to promote now, what seasonality, you're dealing with, right? But then fast forward, 6 months, 12 months down the road, trying to figure out what that consumer picture is going to look like and what they want and what your message is going to be.
Very much. I mean, we just finished a 3 to 5 year kind of trend forecasting study, and I like saying I like feeling uncomfortable. If I'm not feeling uncomfortable, then I'm not doing my job properly. And what is out there and where it could evolve within feeding and kids in general is far different than it is today. And playing that risk and how you start to set the stepping stones in your messaging now so that you're authentic when you hit on that big at that time is a big part of what we talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing to jump in and build on that you sparked for me, Katie, too, is just you can't underscore enough the importance of knowing who you're telling the story to, right? And if you think about it in your everyday life, right, you'll tell a story to your mom differently than your 3-year-old, differently to your best friend, right? So the same is true where you just got to stay disciplined on knowing who you're talking to and the impact that has over crafting the right story and the ability for it to then resonate.
Right, and channels have evolved so much and media has evolved so much that you don't have to paint everyone with the same brush. Right now you have channels to be able to talk to each of those audiences, on their terms. So, because we different reference earlier, right? Consumers in the driver's seat.
Well, and going back to your question about how do we tell those stories, long form versus short form, especially down in 6 second. I mean, that's been a journey for us, an evolution of how we tell those stories, because there's reason we choose certain media channels for 60-second, 90-second, 120-second stories, because that is a big story. And it does a disservice to that story to just try to cut it down, sometimes even to a 30, right? So we've changed our approach and not just cutting everything down, but telling unique stories for those shorter buys. Or so if we have a Christmas ad and it's long form, we might use the 6 second as just a teaser for that, or to tell a completely different facet of that story rather than just this one size fits all approach, which to be honest is where we were a few years ago. We would just kind of cut everything. But there are unique stories that we can tell in those 6 second, not related to maybe a bigger campaign, but we know that that's where this certain audience is and how they're consuming media. So maybe those stories that have a very clear call to action, or something that it's easy to tell that I'm going to use 6 second. I don't need to drag that on to 60 seconds, right? So we really try to vary our mix, and I think that's how we can tell the right stories in the right places.
Makes sense. And Judith, being an agency, are you getting those requests from your brand partners to try to figure out, what the best kind of execution of that message is and that brand story?
Yeah, definitely. Our big advice to our clients is that we should vary the stories and the story executions, but it all has to ladder up to something super, super simple. We call it a brand story. We don't need to get fancy about it. It should be a very, very simple statement of an idea. And then if you get that idea right, you can then give that to a brand ambassador. You can give that to user-generated content with influencers. Everything can be telling a story that ladders, but it can be very specific and unique to the places and the spaces that people spend their time.
Yeah, makes sense. And this is for all of you guys. What are some of the hidden risks of playing it safe, whether that's blending in, losing relevance, or missing growth opportunities that marketers don't often recognize until it's too late? And that's where I feel like that predictive listening comes in and, to help kind of be a warning sign. Anyone can take it and we'll jump off. Katie, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think, you can end up being very fragmented. And if you are too, and it's easy to right now be reactionary. So much is happening very quickly and brands need to stay relevant. But if you're too reactionary, then you can have a fragmented brand perception, brand reputation. And I like to say you're blowing money, because the best way to build a brand is consistent storytelling over time, whether it's in a 6 second spot, a 30-second, or long form over time. And if you're not doing that and staying true to your mission, your values, and where you want the brand to be in 5 years, you can end up being different things to different people and not making an impact or a conversion at shelf at all.
Right.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think for me, the risk, the hidden risk, one of the biggest ones is really becoming irrelevant, being forgotten, being not seen, and to Katie's point, like we're spending so much on media. You can dump all the media money in the world at something, but if it's not a good story, people are going to tune out. And so the biggest risk is just being status quo.
Right, right.
There was actually a really good study. I'm turning into stats woman, which is weird. There was a great study that came out of the UK where they quantified how much more you'd have to pay and spend on media to make up for a dull story. They called it the hidden cost of boring ads. It was $1.9 billion of extra spend. And if you think about, like, there's a good Nielsen study, it's been repeated 3 times now over 25 years. The biggest contribution to sales lift is creativity, 49%, followed by media, 31%, and then brand, the reputation of your brand, 20%. So we can all be so smart, and we should all be so smart about how we reach people and the right frequency and the right channels and the right formats. But if you're not saying something interesting that people fundamentally care about and they want to hear from you, like Pat said, like a story that you want to listen to, you're wasting all of that energy and effort.
Yeah, I'll build on that too. So I don't remember the source, but I was doing a storytelling kind of class for the creative team at work, and I found something, and it was basically given the choice between hearing a profound story told badly or a simple story told profoundly, they'll pick a simple story told amazingly every single time. Right. Everyone, doesn't matter if it's this amazing nugget if you're telling it in this very boring or cliche or forgettable way.
Makes a ton of sense. Pat?
Maybe one other build, and just to take a super practical side of the equation is, look, the reality is there are very few industries where our P&Ls aren't really challenged right now. And so if you're not doing something with your advertising investment, you are losing an opportunity to invest in the business someplace else, right? And whether that's at price on shelf or in your innovation pipeline or you name it, right? Like, you have to act with the privilege and the care that this investment carries, because all of our dollars are finite and limited now more than ever.
Right, and it was also brought up earlier today, the importance of measurement and the advancements in being able to measure. So is that a big thing that you look at when you push something out? How quickly do you get sentiment back, and feedback, and blow it up, if it was fantastic, or kind of retreat and put it into the background and shift gears? Are you able to do that, and do you expect that then from your, either your agency or, go ahead.
I'll go first. I think, right, like there's such great technology out there and varying degrees of real-time measurement, et cetera. I think to answer your question, we have to leverage data and measurement, and there has to be a level of humility that you bring to the workplace, because as passionate as we all get about our ideas and strategies, no one's perfect, and a lot of times they don't work and resonate. And if you're too stubborn to move on and learn from the data, then you're gonna lose.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think also, if we're not careful, you can measure anything to death. And if you're not adding that skill and that human component, what we've all been doing and why we're in our roles, then you could just measure something and take the data for face value and make the wrong decisions. 100%. And so it depends what kind of stories you're telling, but when we're talking about like brand building stories, we have to acknowledge that those take time to build the brand. It's not an immediate lift. And so oftentimes we can have marketers that look at, we might drop a Christmas ad, and they're going to look for this immediate lift, and that's not what it's for. That wasn't the goal. So we work really hard with our team to establish, realistic goals up front based on the strategy and based on the plan, not just on a whim. Like everyone looks at the data and says this didn't lift, or it did, so let's do more of it, when that really wasn't the goal.
Right, right.
As a creative agency, we got frustrated maybe 6 years ago that all of the data sources out there were essentially media response data and/or focus groups and/or panels, which is super helpful when you're researching, yes, but they don't help you work out why something is happening. And so we invented our own creative data source, which we call story data, that actually does allow us to predict the drivers of storytelling success. And I have to say that's been a really useful thing, both in conversations with clients to help figure out what should we do, what story should we tell, but we're now able to use it in measurement so that when a campaign is live, we're able to say, okay, this campaign is super meaningful, but it's not as branded as we want it to be. Let's dial up the branding. So it allows us more specificity to work out what we should do and why we should do it, all in service of creativity, not just in service of response.
That's great. One of the things that it makes me think about too is, Judith, you work with a ton of brands that are trying to cut through the clutter, and you work closely with Publix and with Mark. So where is there, not tension, but where do the ideas come from, the kind of collaboration? Have you evolved? I'm imagining you've evolved that over the years because you know what everybody's strengths are. But how does that kind of work on your end? Are there ever, we're going to have to agree to disagree kind of conversations, or?
I think I'll put this diplomatically, no. When you're a creative agency, you tend to attract clients that believe the same things as you do, right? And so we work with Tropicana, we work with Publix, and Pat and Mark both, and I know Katie does too, really fundamentally believe in the power of storytelling. So right from the get-go, we're speaking the same language and we're trying to achieve the same things. Sure, there'll be a day where our founder and our creative leader wants a certain creative decision that a client might not want to take that creative path, but that's just the push and pull of being in a relationship. We're all trying to do the right thing for the brands that we service, and so if you put that as your North Star, you very quickly make the same and the right decisions together.
Right. Katie, any perspective working with your
Yeah.
creative agencies and creative partners?
Yeah, I mean, we also have the great benefit of having a master storyteller as one of our founders. And so Jen plays a huge role in when we've worked with agencies and the pitching and the conversations that we have around, we may disagree on the take to get there, but the goals we all align on and the belief in the storytelling, so then it ends up being this push and pull of where we're comfortable and where we want to push. I love working with agencies that force us, again, I say this all the time, to be a little uncomfortable in the pitch. Like, that's when that's the right type of partner versus one that presents something that is more forgettable.
Right.
And I think it's a true relationship. If you get that right, then everyone's feedback makes the work stronger. I would just say a small group of people providing feedback makes the work stronger. I think we call it a two-pizza party. Like, that's the right amount of people to make really brave creative decisions. But if you have the same goals in mind, you're going to make the right decisions and make the work stronger.
Yeah, I would agree. It's really having the right conversations up front. Then you're really just talking about execution, right? And we can talk about execution and make changes all day, but it's not about the type of stories that we're telling. So when we joined up with Fig, that was one of the first conversations we had. What type of stories should we be telling? And we level set and agreed there. And then, really, it's not to say it's easy, but we're all on the same page almost every conversation. And yes, there's going to be disagreements or there's going to be some push and pull, but it's not because we're just trying something creatively. It's really, we know it's the right thing to do. How are we doing it?
Right. That makes a ton of sense. Does anyone, I know you can jump in here, have a time when you really pushed the envelope and you were like, we're not sure how this is going to work, but it panned out and it had a positive result, whether it was sales lift, buzz, getting picked up by influencers, whatever it might be. Are there any things that kind of pop into your head that thought, wow, I'm glad we did that?
I'll share one, and it's just very personal. Mark Filio founded Fig, and I came on board day 1.5, and there was the two of us, and we pitched Sprint, and we won that business 13 years ago, and we launched our agency. And honestly, I've thought about buying a new pair of shoes for longer than should we launch our own company. It just felt exactly the right thing to do. It felt really fun. It felt very freeing. Mark was the chairman and chief creative officer of TBWA before Fig. I was the president of LBI that became Digitas LBI. And just to have our own company and be able to choose the company we keep and make the right decisions for our employees and make work that we were proud of, that was probably the riskiest decision that I've personally ever made. And I did it in 2 seconds and have never looked back. And it's a wonderful place to be.
That's great. You can tell from the work that you guys are producing, it's, things are jiving. So
I would say one of the biggest was early on when I first came on board. We had a discussion to actually split the brand and the portfolio into not just baby and toddler, but venture into kids. We realized that we were actually selling quite a bit of our product to kids, but you have to have that perception shift. And if any of you saw, any of the news recently, like, we still get called a baby brand. This is a long road. This is a heavy lift for myself, the team, Josie here from our social team. It's something we talk about all the time, and we've seen change over 5 years, but it is that it was that risk, and it was the right thing to do for the brand, for our consumers, for the families. But at the time, it was, are we walking away from something very trusted to venture into a very cluttered and competitive unknown?
Yeah, yeah. All right, we are winding down, so we don't have much time for our lightning round, but I think the theme that I heard from everybody, and you can chime in, what is the one piece of advice you give to people who are, grappling with this day in, day out? Uncomfortable, was kind of the common word that I heard from almost everybody, and the value in that, But if there's anything else, you have 58 seconds to share.
I mean, I would say if you're brand side, you know your brand, or you should know your brand. And so there's just a certain amount of, inherent just listening to your gut that you can't overstate. So you're going to take risks, but you have to be in the brand and making decisions for the brand. And if you're doing that, when you're looking at work, you're going to know if this is an area we should go or not. And sometimes we try to talk ourselves into work that we really know we shouldn't do, or we talk ourselves out of work that we really should be doing, because there's, the rational part of our brain is sort of taking over. And I'm not saying there's not a place for the rational brain, but there's a level of just trusting what you know about the brand that you have to listen to.
Yeah, I love, not underestimating your gut. I feel like that gets so lost with the overwhelming amount of data and measurement, and it's essential. So, any other thoughts?
Maybe on a similar theme, I would just say, like, believe in yourself, right? Someone's always going to have more experience or a louder voice in the room, and never underestimate your own beliefs and reasons to believe.
That's awesome. Oh, go ahead, Katie. No, we're okay. It keeps changing. I'm not sure what. I think we're up now. Oh, okay. I thought that. All right. Well, then we're wrapping it up. So thank you all so much. This was terrific. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Brand Innovators. Mark, I saw you somewhere. So thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.